Hey guys, tonight we slip into the torchlit workshops of ancient Nubia, where the air hums with the clink of hammers and the soft chant of goldsmiths inscribing ritual poems onto shimmering jewelry. Picture yourself dodging camel caravans in a bustling market, the scent of myrrh and molten gold curling around you as artisans etch verses that could summon gods or sway kings. You're diving into a world where every golden curve hides a sacred secret, and one wrong word might unleash divine wrath. Spoiler: you probably won't survive this maze of mystic bling without a few goosebumps. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop a comment with your city and local time. I'm curious where you're drifting off from tonight. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're in the heart of Nubia, around the 8th century BCE, in a city like Meroe, where goldsmiths craft jewelry not just for beauty, but for power. These aren't mere trinkets. They're amulets, rings, and necklaces inscribed with ritual poems, tiny verses invoking gods like Amun, or blessing wearers with strength. Why poems? Because in Nubia, words were magic, believed to channel divine favor when etched in gold. Imagine you're a goldsmith, your fingers trembling as you carve a prayer into a bracelet, knowing it's for a queen's wrist. One slip, and you're not just botching a bauble, you're risking a curse from the heavens. Historically, Nubia, straddling modern Sudan and southern Egypt, was a gold-rich kingdom, its artisans famed for intricate jewelry that rivaled Egypt's. Goldsmiths held high status, their work adorning royalty and temples. But here's the quirky bit. Some believe the gold itself chose the poems humming faintly when the right verse was inscribed. Sounds wild, right? Like your laptop picking your playlist. Historians still argue whether this was spiritual belief or a crafting ritual. Did gold really hum, or was it just artisan mystique? You pause by a market stall, the air thick with dust and the tang of molten metal, catching a goldsmith's low chant as he etches a verse onto a ring. The poem's tiny, maybe a plea to Amun for victory, but its strokes are precise, hidden in the gold's gleam, so only priests or royals might read it. You squint, but the words elude you, designed to vanish unless you know the sacred key. These inscriptions weren't for everyone. Only the initiated, like kings or shamans, could grasp their power, guarding Nubia's divine secrets. You smirk, thinking it's like hiding your diary's best page in a doodle, clever but risky. You step closer, the goldsmith's hammer, tapping like a heartbeat. He's not just crafting, he's weaving magic, his poems binding wearers to gods and glory. You're starting to feel the weight of his craft, each stroke a whisper of devotion. Ever hide a secret in plain sight? That's the goldsmith's game, played in Nubia's golden glow. But the real magic unfolds in their workshops, where these poetic inscriptions take shape, and you're about to slip into their smoky, sacred world. You're weaving through the sun-baked streets of Meroe, the Nubian capital, where the air shimmers with heat, and the scent of molten gold drifts from nearby forges. The city hums with the clatter of market stalls and the distant chant of priests. But you're still chasing those ritual poems inscribed on golden jewelry, their tiny verses invoking Amun's favor. Remember that goldsmith chanting as he etched a ring in the market? His sacred words were born in workshops, the heart of Nubia's mystic craft. Now, you're exploring these smoky sanctuaries where poetic inscriptions took shape, and trust me, it's hotter than a forge at high noon. Picture yourself ducking into a low-roofed workshop, its mud brick walls glowing under flickering oil lamps, the air thick with the tang of metal and myrrh smoke. Goldsmiths hunch over stone benches, their hammers tapping gold sheets. Their voices murmur in chants as they inscribe poems with bone styluses. These aren't just workplaces. They're sacred spaces blessed by priests to honor Amun and Apetamak, the lion god. The jewelry's inscriptions, prayers for strength, curses against foes, or blessings for fertility are crafted here. Each verse a divine code meant for kings or shamans. Historically, by the 8th century BCE, Meroe's workshops were hubs of Nubian artistry, producing gold jewelry for royalty, and temples, their poems etched with precision, rivaling Egyptian scribes. You're watching a master goldsmith carve a tiny plea to Amun on a necklace, his hand steady, knowing it's for a queen's coronation. Here's the quirky bit. Some goldsmiths believed their hammers spoke to the gold guiding strokes if offered to Apetamak's shrine. Imagine your tool whispering directions like a GPS sounds like a smith's fever dream. Right? Historians still argue whether this was spiritual ritual or a focusing trick. Did hammers really speak? Or were goldsmiths just in the zone? You step closer, the workshop's heat prickling your skin. The goldsmith's poem, barely visible, invokes protection for the wearer, its strokes hidden in the necklace's gleam. These workshops are fortresses of skill where apprentices stoke fires and learn verses by rote, never writing them down. Secrecy is king. A leaked poem could weaken its divine power or let rivals mimic royal blessings. You're struck by the tension, each tap a vow to Nubia's gods and kings. It's like coding a sacred app, but one bug could anger Amun. You smirk, thinking of your own hidden secrets, ever stash a note somewhere sneaky. That's the goldsmith's vibe forged in gold. You notice an apprentice polishing a bone stylus, his eyes darting to the master's work, eager but years from inscribing poems. The workshop's hierarchy is rigid. Masters hold the verses, apprentices tend tools, and chant prayers to Amun, earning trust through sweat. A misstep, like etching an unblessed verse, could banish you from the craft your hands marked as unworthy. You wince, imagining the shame. It's like flunking a group project and losing your team's trust, but with your career torched. You chuckle, picturing the apprentice double-checking his stylus like you'd proofread a risky email, desperate to stay in the game. You glance at a half-finished amulet, its surface etched with a prayer that vanishes in shadow. The goldsmith's skill is uncanny, blending poetry and metal into divine art, their verses readable only by those who know the sacred light. These workshops aren't just forges, they're Nubia's scriptorium, where gold speaks for gods and kings. You're hooked, feeling the pulse of their world, but the poem's spiritual power runs deeper, tying jewelry to Amun's will, and you're about to see how faith shaped every golden verse under Meroe's starry skies. As you slip out, Meroe's rhythm, camel grunts, priests' chants, feels like a golden heartbeat. You're starting to grasp the goldsmith's craft, their workshops not just dens of fire, but cradles of divine poetry. Those inscribed verses are their legacy, but their spiritual roots make them glow, and you're itching to unravel their sacred thread. You're winding through the torchlit alleys of Meroya, the Nubian capital, where the night air carries the desert's chill and the faint scent of burning myrrh from a nearby temple. The city hums with the soft clatter of market stragglers and the low drone of priests' prayers. But you're still chasing those ritual poems inscribed on golden jewelry, their tiny verses pulsing with divine power. Remember that goldsmith etching a plea to Amun in the workshop's smoky glow. His craft was born in a sacred forge, but it's the spiritual essence of these poems that makes them shine. Now you're diving into how spirituality shaped the poetic inscriptions on Nubian jewelry. And trust me, it's deeper than the Nile at flood. Picture yourself standing in the temple courtyard, its sandstone walls carved with Amun's ram horns, the starlit sky above mirrored in a golden necklace glinting on an altar. Each verse etched into the gold prayers for victory blessings, for fertility or curses against foes, holds Waka, a sacred force tying it to gods like Amuna Petamak or the ancestral spirits. For Nubians, gold wasn't just wealth. It was divine, a conduit for spiritual power when inscribed with ritual poems. These verses, often chanted during crafting, were believed to bind wearers to the god's will. Historically, by the 8th century BCE, Nubian religion blended local deities with Egyptian influences with jewelry, serving as talismans in rituals for kings, queens, and priests. You're watching a goldsmith offer a coca-like cat leaf to Amun's shrine before etching a verse, his chant invoking divine strength for a warrior's ring. Here's the quirky bit. Some goldsmiths claim the gold sang during moonlit rituals, its hum guiding the poem's strokes. Imagine your jewelry vibing like a cosmic choir. Sounds like a mystic's tall tale, right? Historians still argue whether this was spiritual belief or poetic focus. Did gold really sing, or were goldsmiths just tuned to their craft? You step closer, the altar's warmth tingling your skin. The goldsmith's verse, a tiny prayer for a queen's fertility, isn't just art. It's a spell it strokes, aligning with Amun's celestial favor to ensure her lineage thrives. These poems, often tied to sacred events, solstices, Nile floods, or royal coronations, anchoring Nubia's harmony with the cosmos. You're struck by the intimacy, how each stroke is a prayer linking wearer to divine will. It's like writing a blessing that's also a horoscope, but for godly stakes. You smirk, thinking of your own moments of awe. Ever feel a place has a soul? These goldsmiths etch that soul into gold, their verses a bridge to the heavens. You notice a priest nearby, his cot, offering smoldering as he inspects a bracelet's poem, ensuring it honors a petamak without straying into blasphemy. His presence is a reminder. A flawed verse could anger the gods, risking a failed harvest or a lost battle. You wince imagining the goldsmith's stress. It's like posting a sacred caption, hoping it doesn't flop with the divine, except here it's Amun's judgment. You chuckle, picturing the goldsmith double-checking his style. It's like you'd proofread a risky tweet. The spiritual stakes are sky high. A misetched word might curse a wearer, dimming Nubia's divine favor. You trace a faint verse on an amulet, its prayer vanishing unless the starlight hits just right. The poems are subtle, meant for those who know priests, decoding battle blessings. queens reading fertility prayers. The goldsmith's faith isn't just belief, it's discipline. Their stylus is guided by cat rituals and starlit chants to keep the huaca strong. You're hooked, seeing how spirituality shapes every stroke, turning jewelry into sacred scripts. You recall that workshop's smoky hum, its hammers tapping to Amun's rhythm? These poems aren't just etched. They're guarded by guilds, sacred brotherhoods who keep their secrets tight. And you're about to meet the goldsmiths who weave this divine web under Meroa's starry skies. As you slip from the courtyard, Meroa's pulse priests chants desert winds feels like a sacred rhythm. You're starting to grasp the goldsmith's world, their spiritual craft, not just art, but a pact with Amun and Apetamak. Those inscribed poems are prayers in gold, but the guilds that guard them are Nubia's heartbeat, and you're itching to step into their hallowed circle. You're weaving through the starlit haze of Meroa's temple district, the night air cool with the desert's breath and the faint scent of smoldering cat from a nearby shrine. The city hums with the soft clatter of night markets and the low chant of priests. But you're still chasing those ritual poems inscribed on Nubian jewelry, their prayers to Amun glowing with spiritual huaca. Remember that goldsmith offering cut before etching a fertility verse. His divine craft was a pact with the gods, but he didn't work alone. Now you're uncovering the secret guilds of goldsmiths who guarded these poetic inscriptions, and trust me, it's tighter than a gold bead's knot. Picture yourself slipping into a mud brick workshop, its walls flickering under oil lamps, the air thick with the tang of molten gold and the murmur of chants. Goldsmiths sit in a circle, their bone styluses scratching verses onto amulets, their voices sinking in a hymn to Apetamak. These aren't just artisans, they're a brotherhood, a guild bound by oaths to protect their sacred inscriptions. In Nubian society, goldsmiths formed elite groups often tied to clans or temples, tasked with crafting jewelry for kings, queens, and priests. Their poems, blessings for strength, curses for foes, or prayers for harvests, were guild secrets shared only with trusted members under Amun's gaze. Historically, by the 8th century BCE, Meroa's guilds were pivotal, their inscribed jewelry adorning royalty and sanctifying rituals, their skill rivaling Egypt's. You're watching a master goldsmith guide an apprentice's stylus, his tone sharp, teaching a prayer stroke that invokes victory for a king's ring. Here's the quirky bit. Some guilds use gold-dusted tokens like tiny amulets to mark members believing they carried Amun's protection. Imagine flashing a golden badge like it's a secret club pass. Sounds like a Smith's swagger, right? Historians still argue whether these tokens were practical or ceremonial. Did they just mark loyalty or hold divine power? You edge closer, the workshop's heat prickling your skin. The master's prayer, a faint verse on the ring, is barely visible, its strokes meant for a priest's eyes. The guild's rules are ironclad. Masters inscribe poems, apprentices tend fires and learn chants, and no outsider learns the verse's sacred forms. Betraying the guild, like sharing a blessing's rhythm with a rival, could mean exile your name, erased from the clan's lore. You wince, imagining the sting. It's like getting kicked out of a group chat for leaking secrets, but with your whole kin shunning you. You smirk, picturing the apprentice double-checking his stylus like you'd proofread a risky post. Ever hide a secret too big to spill? That's their life. etched in gold. You notice the guild's unity, their chants blending with hammer taps, each smith a thread in a sacred weave. Their poems are Nubia's pulse, linking kings to gods, warriors to victory, queens to fertility. But secrecy breeds tension. A rival guild might covet your curse verse, stealing it to claim a temple's favor. You're struck by their vigilance, how they guard their craft like a fortress. It's like protecting your startup's code, but with divine stakes. You chuckle, thinking of a goldsmith eyeballing a rival's amulet, like you'd side-eye a competitor's project. The workshop feels alive, a brotherhood where every stroke binds them to Amun and Nubia's glory. You glance at a half-carved necklace, its prayer shimmering faintly, designed to vanish unless starlight hits it right. The guild's skill is eerie, hiding verses in plain sight, their poems a language only they speak. They're not just goldsmiths, they're keepers of Meroa's soul, their jewelry threading divine power through the kingdom. You're hooked, feeling their pride, but the king's shadow looms, his eyes watching every stylus. You recall that fertility prayer, its divine glow tied to Apademak. The royal oversight is next shaping these cryptic verses, and you're itching to see how the king's will binds the guilds under Meroa's starry peaks. As you slip out, Meroa's rhythm, camel grunts, temple bells, feels like a golden heartbeat. You're starting to grasp the goldsmith's world, their guilds not just workshops, but sacred circles guarding Nubia's secrets. Those inscribed poems are their legacy, but the king's grip is firm, and you're ready to step into his watchful domain. You're navigating the torchlit bustle of Meroa's royal quarter, the night air sharp with desert chill and the faint scent of molten gold drifting from nearby forges. The city hums with the clatter of guard spears and the low chant of temple hymns. But you're still chasing those ritual poems inscribed on Nubian jewelry, their prayers to Amun, binding guilds to divine secrets. Remember that master goldsmith guiding a victory verse in the workshop's glow. His brotherhood guarded Meroa's soul, but they crafted under a heavier gaze, the king's. Now, you're diving into how Nubian rulers controlled this poetic jewelry craft, and trust me, it's stricter than a pharaoh's decree. Picture yourself skirting the edge of the royal palace, its sandstone walls carved with lion-headed Apetamak, as guards with bronze shields eye you warily. A goldsmith hurries past, his cloak concealing a golden amulet etched with a faint prayer, his steps quickening toward the king's court. These inscribed jewels aren't just adornments, they're royal talismans. Their poems, blessings for conquest, curses for rivals, or prayers for floods crafted under the king's divine command. Historically, by the 8th century BCE, Nubian kings like Paye of the 25th dynasty wielded absolute power, overseeing crafts to ensure loyalty and divine favor, with goldsmiths reporting to nobles who served the throne. You're watching a goldsmith present his amulet to a royal overseer, his hand steady, but his breath short, knowing a flawed verse could mark him disloyal. Here's the quirky bit. Some goldsmiths believed the king's touch awakened their poems, making inscriptions stronger if he wore the jewel first. Imagine your boss's handshake juicing up your work. Sounds like a royal power trip, right? Historians still argue whether this was devotion or court flattery. Did the king's touch really empower poems, or were goldsmiths currying favor? You step closer, the palace's heat radiating from its stones. The goldsmith's prayer, a subtle curse against enemies, is meant for the king's war campaign, its strokes hidden in the amulet's gleam. The king's oversight is relentless. Guilds submit verses to his court, ensuring every blessing aligns with royal will. A poem too bold, like a curse targeting a rival king without approval, could brand a guild as traitors, risking execution or exile. You wince imagining the goldsmith's dread. It's like posting a risky design online, knowing the CEO's watching. Except here, it's a god-king's wrath. You smirk, picturing the goldsmith double-checking his stylus like you'd proofread a high-stakes email. You notice a guard's gaze linger, his shield glinting like a warning. The king's spies, often temple priests or nobles, infiltrate guilds sniffing for defiance. A leaked poem could weaken its divine power or let rivals mimic royal blessings, threatening Nubia's cosmic order. Goldsmiths counter with cunning, hiding verses and angles. Only priests see their loyalty etched in every stroke. You're struck by their nerve, how they weave obedience into gold while dodging royal scrutiny. It's like slipping a secret note into a work report, but with styluses and divine stakes. You chuckle thinking of a goldsmith hiding a prayer like you'd bury a joke in a serious text. Ever keep a secret from a nosy boss? That's their daily grind, forged in Meroa's heat. You glance at a nearby temple stairway, its golden ornaments etched with faint poems that shift in torchlight. The king's grip ensures these inscriptions serve his throne battles. One flood secured heirs blessed. But it's a tightrope guilds must please the king while guarding their craft's wasa, their poems a dance of duty and devotion. You're hooked, feeling the goldsmith's tension, their jewelry not just art, but royal script. You recall that guild's workshop, their chants binding them to Amun. Those poems hold deeper meaning, sacred codes beyond royal commands. And you're about to unravel what these cryptic verses truly whisper under Meroa's starry skies. As you slip past the palace, Meroa's rhythm guard steps, desert winds, feels like a royal heartbeat. You're starting to grasp the goldsmith's world, their guilds bound to the king's will, their poetic inscriptions, his voice in gold. Those hidden verses are Nubia's secrets, but their sacred meanings run deeper, and you're itching to decode their divine tales. You're weaving through the starlit bustle of Meroa's royal quarter, the night air sharp with the desert's chill, and the faint tang of burning myrrh from temple altars. The city hums with the clatter of guards' spears and the soft chant of priests, but you're still chasing those ritual poems inscribed on Nubian jewelry, their prayers to Amun, binding guilds to the king's will. Remember that goldsmith presenting his amulet to a royal overseer, its curse verse gleaming for a war campaign. Those poems were royal commands, but their meanings run deeper, a divine language of power. Now, you're unraveling the sacred codes hidden in these ritual poems, and trust me, it's trickier than decoding a hieroglyph in moonlight. Picture yourself pausing by a temple altar, its sandstone glowing under torches, a golden bracelet etched with a faint prayer catching the light. The poem's tiny, maybe a plea for a Petamax strength or a curse against invaders, but it's a cipher encoding divine blessings, royal lineage, or ritual dates. A swirl might trace a king's descent from a moon across, invoke a Nile flood's timing. In Nubia, where writing was rare gold, was a sacred script, its poems read only by priests, kings, or trusted nobles. Historically, by the 8th century BCE, Nubian jewelry served as talismans, their inscriptions blending spiritual and practical roles, from ensuring harvests to guiding warriors. You're squinting at the spiral verse, its strokes hinting at a solstice blessing, but only if you know the divine key. Here's the quirky bit. Some priests claimed poems whispered their meanings during cat-induced trances, revealing secrets to the worthy. Imagine a bracelet chatting like a mystic oracle. Sounds like a shaman's wild vision. Right? Historians still argue whether this was spiritual insight or ritual performance. Did poems really speak, or were priests amplifying their mystique? You run your fingers along the bracelet, feeling its spiral vanish unless the torchlight hits just right. It's a lineage prayer tying a queen to Amun's bloodline, meant for a priest's eyes. The goldsmith's genius lies in subtlety. Verses blend into the gold sheen, invisible to outsiders, but clear to the initiated. You're struck by the layers' practical meanings, like floodgates for priests keep the kingdom thriving, while spiritual ones, like battle blessings, bind it to Apetamak's roar. It's like hiding a calendar in a poem, but for divine stakes. You smirk, thinking of your own secret codes. Ever jot a note only you could crack? That's the goldsmith's art forged in Meroa's glow. You notice a noble nearby, his gaze lingering on a cross-etched ring, decoding a harvest ritual's timing. These poems are Nubia's pulse blessings, fuel wars, curses, fend off foes, lineages, secure loyalty. But they're fragile. A misread verse could mistime a flood offering, angering a moon, or weaken a warrior's charm, risking defeat. You wince, imagining the goldsmith's stress. It's like sending a coded email praying it's not misread, except here it's a kingdom's fate. You chuckle, picturing a goldsmith double-checking his prayer like you'd triple-check a risky text. The verse's meanings are a dance of power and faith, each stroke a story only Meroa's elite can read. You step back, the altar's glow, framing the bracelet like a starry scroll. The poems are layered, practical for nobles, sacred for priests, divine for the kingdom's soul. You recall that guild workshop at Stylus's, tapping to Amun's rhythm. Those inscriptions aren't just royal, they're cosmic, tied to the stars guiding Nubia's calendar, and you're about to grasp how celestial alignments shape these poetic codes under Meroa's sacred skies. The king's oversight kept them in check, but the heavens gave them their spark, and you're itching to unravel that starry thread. As you linger, Meroa's rhythm, temple bells, desert winds, feels like a coded pulse. You're starting to grasp the goldsmith's world, their poetic inscriptions, not just prayers, but the kingdom's heartbeat, whispering of blessings and time. Those hidden verses hold Nubia's secrets, but their starry roots run deeper, and you're ready to trace their celestial weave. You're perched in the moonlit stillness of Meroa's temple district, the desert air cool with the scent of dry acacia and the faint glow of torches casting shadows on sandstone walls. The city's pulse softens. Guards' steps fade, priests' chants hum low, but you're still chasing those ritual poems inscribed on Nubian jewelry, their spirals and crosses encoding divine blessings. Remember that noble decoding a harvest prayer on a ring by the altar. Those verses were Nubia's sacred script, but their meanings weren't just earthly. They were tied to the heavens. Now, you're grasping how cosmic alignments guided the poetic inscriptions on jewelry. And trust me, it's more dazzling than a star shower over the Nile. Picture yourself in a temple observatory, its roof open to a sky ablaze with constellations, the goldsmith's amulet glinting below its etched prayer, mirroring the stars' dance. For Nubians, the heavens were a divine map with constellations like Orion or the Pleiades, guiding rituals, harvests, and wars. Goldsmiths wove these celestial markers into their poems, aligning verses with solstices, equinoxes, or planetary rises to amplify their huaca. A spiral might trace Sirius's rise, a cross mark the sun's zenith for Amun's festival. Historically, by the 8th century, BCE Nubian astronomy was sophisticated with temples, like those in Meroe, using stone markers to track celestial cycles, ensuring the kingdom's harmony with the gods. You're watching a goldsmith etch a stepped verse, his stylus guided by a priest pointing to the Pleiades, their ascent, signaling a planting rite. Here's the quirky bit. Some goldsmiths believed starlight blessed their inscriptions, making poems stronger if etched under specific constellations. Imagine your stylus glowing like a cosmic pen, sounds like a stargazer's fantasy rite. Historians still argue whether this was spiritual belief or a ritual focus. Did stars really bless poems? Or was it just poetic craft? You step closer, the amulet's cool gold tingling under your fingers. The stepped verse, a faint prayer for a flood's timing, aligns with Sirius's heliacal rise, a Nile marker for priests. These cosmic poems aren't random, they're precise, tying Nubia's rhythm to Amun's celestial path or Venus's arc. You're struck by the genius, how a cross can map a solstice while blending into the gold sheen. It's like hiding a star chart in a haiku, but for divine stakes. You smirk, thinking of your own stargazing nights. Ever feel the skies pull? These goldsmiths etch that pull into gold, their verses a dialogue with the cosmos. You notice a priest nearby, his cat leaves scattered as he confirms the verse's alignment with the Pleiades' climb. His role ensures the poem's truth, a misaligned spiral, could mistime a flood ritual, angering Pachamama or Amun. You wince, imagining the goldsmith's nerves. It's like syncing your calendar for a big event, but with godly wrath at stake. You chuckle, picturing the goldsmith squinting at the stars like you'd check an app before a trip. The jewelry is more than adornment. It's a celestial clock, its poems guiding Nubia's sacred and practical life, sowing, warring, worshiping. You trace a spiral verse on a necklace, its curve echoing Venus's evening path, a royal lineage prayer tied to the star's divine glow. The goldsmith's skill is uncanny, blending astronomy with secrecy, their poems readable only by those who know the heavens dance. You're hooked, seeing the jewelry as cosmic scrolls, each stroke a starlit blessing. You recall that guild workshop, its chants syncing with Apetamak's roar. These poems don't etch themselves, the tools, humble yet sacred, are the goldsmith's hands, and you're about to examine how they crafted these celestial codes under Meroe's starry gaze. The king's oversight kept them grounded, but the stars gave them flight, and you're itching to grip that sacred craft. As you linger by the observatory, Meroa's rhythm temple drums, desert winds, feels like a starry pulse. You're starting to grasp the goldsmith's world, their poetic inscriptions, not just prayers, but celestial hymns tying earth to sky. Those cosmic verses are Nubia's soul, but the tools that shaped them are its heartbeat, and you're ready to explore their divine power. You're nestled in the flickering glow of a Meroe workshop, the night air heavy with the scent of molten gold and the faint smoke of cat offerings from a nearby shrine. The city's pulse is soft, temple drums hum low, desert winds whisper, but you're still chasing those ritual poems inscribed on Nubian jewelry, their spirals tracing Sirius's cosmic rise. Remember that goldsmith etching a Pleiades prayer under starlight? His celestial verses were divine, but they were forged with tools as sacred as the gold itself. Now you're examining the instruments used to inscribe these poetic codes, and trust me, it's sharper than a lion's claw in a Ephemer's temple. Picture yourself crouching by a stone workbench, its surface littered with basalt hammers, bone styluses, and polished obsidian points, their edges glinting like stars under torchlight. Goldsmiths wield these tools with reverence, their hands calloused but precise, each stroke etching a prayer or curse onto a golden amulet. These aren't just tools, they're vessels of Huaca, blessed with cat rituals to carry Amun's will. Historically, by the 8th century, BCE Nubian goldsmiths were masters of precision, using simple instruments to craft jewelry for royalty and temples their inscriptions so fine they rivaled Egyptian artistry. You're watching a master goldsmith tap a bone stylus against a gold ring, carving a faint blessing for a king's victory, his rhythm as steady as a Nile pulse. Here's the quirky bit. Some goldsmiths believe their styluses danced when blessed by moonlight, guiding strokes for perfect poems. Imagine your pen twirling like it's got a mind of its own. Sounds like a smith's mystic vibe, right? Historians still argue whether this was spiritual belief or a craftsman's focus. Did styluses really dance, or were goldsmiths just in the zone? You lean closer, the workshop's heat prickling your skin. The goldsmith's stylus, honed to a needle's point, etches a spiral prayer so subtle it vanishes unless torchlight catches it. He uses a basalt hammer to tap gently shaping gold sheets, while a polished obsidian point smooths edges, blending the verse into the ring's sheen. A bronze awl traded from distant lands measures angles to align the spiral with Venus's arc. You're struck by the simplicity, how these humble tools craft divine codes. It's like sketching a masterpiece with a twig, but for godly stakes. You smirk, thinking of your own favorite tools ever treat a pen like it's magic. These goldsmiths cradle their styluses like sacred relics. You notice an apprentice grinding a new obsidian point, his hands raw from shaping its edge. Tools are tapu, handled only by guild members blessed with chance to a Ephemer to keep their huaca strong. Apprentices earn the right through years of tending fires and memorizing prayers, learning to etch only after proving loyalty. A shaky stroke or dull stylus could botch a poem, weakening its blessing or mistiming a ritual. You wince, imagining the master's glare. It's like flubbing a code commit, but with a moon's judgment. You chuckle, picturing the apprentice polishing his stylus like you'd baby your phone, praying it doesn't fail. The tools demand precision, stored in woven pouches blessed by priests to preserve their sacred power. You glance at a half-finished necklace, its cross prayer gleaming faintly, a harvest blessing hidden in plain sight. The goldsmiths pair each tool with purpose hammers for shaping, styluses for verses, obsidian for smoothing. Their skill turns basalt into divine scripts, each stroke a nod to the stars. You're hooked, seeing these tools as more than instruments. They're the guild's soul, channeling Amun's will into gold. You recall that starry observatory, its Pleiades guiding a solstice verse. But unity, phrase, and rivalries among goldsmiths over these sacred poems simmer ready to flare, and you're about to witness the tensions brewing under Meroe's celestial glow. As you ease out of the workshop, Meroe's rhythm temple bell's desert breezes feels like a golden pulse. You're starting to grasp the goldsmith's craft, their tools not just shaping gold, but weaving Inti's light into Nubia's secrets. Those poetic inscriptions are cosmic, but guild rivalries are all too human, and you're itching to see the sparks fly over their sacred verses. You're skulking through the shadowed alleys of Meroe's artisan quarter, the night air biting with desert chill and the faint scent of smoldering myrrh from a nearby temple. The city hums with the soft clink of hammers and the distant drone of priests' chants, but you're still chasing those ritual poems inscribed on Nubian jewelry, their spirals glowing with starry huaca. Remember that goldsmith in the workshop, his bone stylus dancing a Pleiades prayer into gold. His sacred tools wove divine verses, but not all guilds shared the forge peacefully. Now you're witnessing the rivalries among goldsmiths over these poetic secrets, and trust me, it's fiercer than a lion's roar in a Petamok's shrine. Picture yourself hiding behind a mud brick wall near a workshop, overhearing two goldsmiths from rival guilds clash like desert storms over a disputed spiral verse. One's from a Meroe guild famed for its cross prayers, the other from a Kerma faction known for swirling blessings. Their inscribed poems, blessings for kings, curses for foes, are their pride. Each guild claiming their verses hold the strongest huaca. Historically, by the 8th century BCE, Nubian goldsmith guilds, often tied to clans or temples, competed for prestige, their inscriptions securing royal commissions or sacred rights. A stolen verse could let a rival claim your temple contract, undermining your guild's mana. You're watching the Kerma goldsmith accuse the other of copying a cross prayer, his voice sharp as his obsidian stylus. Here's the quirky bit. Some guilds swore stolen verses angered celestial spirits, bringing drought to punish thieves. Imagine a dry spell snitching on a rival sounds like a goldsmith's curse, right? Historians still argue whether these tales were spiritual fears or competitive gossip. Did spirits really curse, or were guilds just throwing shade? You edge closer, the workshop's torchlight casting jagged shadows. The Meroe goldsmith snaps back, claiming his cross is older, blessed by Amun's priest. These poems aren't just art, they're tapu tied to gods and ancestors. Stealing one risks divine wrath, but it also threatens a guild's livelihood. If a rival's spiral outshines yours, your commissions dry up and your clan's honor fades. You wince, feeling the sting. It's like a competitor stealing your project's spotlight, but with your kin's rep trashed. You smirk, picturing the goldsmiths glaring like you'd eye a co-worker snagging your idea in a meeting. The argument escalates, until a master goldsmith steps in, his voice slicing like a basalt hammer, warning of consequences. Feuds could spark temple bans, fracture alliances, or draw the king's ire if a disputed verse delays a royal amulet. You recall that apprentice polishing his stylus, his hands raw under scrutiny. Rivalries make that pressure brutal. Guilds guard their poems with paranoia, teaching verses through secret chants or coded gestures to foil thieves. A leaked blessing could let rivals claim a solstice right or weaken a king's charm. You're struck by the fragility, how one slip can unravel a guild's huaca. You chuckle, thinking it's like a family recipe fight, but with Amun's judgment on the line. You slip away, the alley's chill seeping into your bones. The guild's pride fuels their craft, but it breeds suspicion. A goldsmith from a rival clan might linger, his smile hiding a thief's intent to steal a swirl stroke. The men work on their styluses steady, but you sense their watchfulness. These poems aren't just inscriptions, they're battlegrounds. Their verses a source of glory and strife. Ever deal with team drama over credit? That's the goldsmith's world. Every stroke a test of loyalty. You recall that Pleiades' prayer, its starry glow tied to Amun. But priests wield deeper influence, shaping these verses' divine weave. And you're about to see how their sacred hands guided the goldsmith's poetic craft under Meroa's starry glow. As you melt back into Meroa's rhythm, torches crackling desert breezes, you feel the goldsmith's tension. Their poetic inscriptions are their heart, but rivalries cut deep, sparking feuds under Apetamak's gaze. Those verses bind them to the gods, but priests' will binds them tighter, and you're itching to step into their sacred domain. You're creeping through the pre-dawn hush of Meroa's temple district, the desert air sharp with the chill of the Nile and the faint scent of smoldering cat from sacred braziers. The city stirs with the soft pad of priests' sandals and the low hum of dawn hymns. But you're still chasing those ritual poems inscribed on Nubian jewelry, their cross prayers sparking guild rivalries fiercer than a desert wind. Remember that goldsmith feud over a stolen spiral verse, hissing with celestial curses? Their poetic codes were a battlefield, but a deeper force guided their stylus as priests. Now, you're revealing how priests shaped these inscribed poems, and trust me, it's holier than a solstice dawn in Amun's shrine. Picture yourself standing in the shadowed courtyard of a temple, its sandstone pillars carved with Apetamak's lion mane, as a priest in a leopard skin robe inspects a golden amulet etched with a faint prayer. His cot offering smolders, and his eyes keen as a falcon's trace the verse's strokes. In Nubian society, priests were cosmic gatekeepers, bridging earth and sky through rituals that tied goldwork to Amun Apetamak and ancestral spirits. Jewelry poems, blessings for kings, curses for foes, or harvest prayers needed their blessing to carry huaca, the sacred essence. Historically, by the 8th century BCE, Meroa's priests wielded immense influence, overseeing religious and civic life, ensuring inscriptions aligned with celestial events like the Nile's flood or Sirius's rise. You're watching the priest nod, approving the amulet's verse as a war blessing his chant, sealing its divine manna. Here's the quirky bit. Some priests claimed poems glowed faintly during cat visions, signaling Amun's favor for their strokes. Imagine a ring shining like a divine text alert. Sounds like a shaman's trance rite. Historians still argue whether this was mystical insight or ritual drama did poems really glow, or were priests flexing their cosmic clout? You step closer, the courtyard's incense curling around you. The priest's role is vital. His star knowledge ensures the verse's cross aligns with Orion's climb, guiding a king's battle rite. But his influence is a tight rein. A poem too bold, like a curse defying a rival, without a moon's sanction, could be deemed heretical, risking divine wrath or a failed campaign. You wince imagining the goldsmith's dread. It's like crafting a sacred post, hoping it doesn't flop with the gods. Except here, it's a cosmic audit. You smirk, picturing a priest squinting at a spiral like it's a dodgy spreadsheet. The priest's power isn't just spiritual. It's practical. They're cat rituals and starlit vigils shaping verses that keep Nubia's rhythm. You notice a goldsmith hovering nearby, his hands clasped, awaiting the priest's verdict. Priests don't just bless, they dictate. A guild might plan a harvest prayer, but the priest decides its form, perhaps a stepped motif, to echo Inti's rays. They demand offerings, cat gold dust or ram blood before etching begins, ensuring the god's favor. Skipping these risks, tainting the poem's waka. Dooming its power, you're hooked, seeing priests as co-authors, their chants turning inscriptions into divine scripts. It's not just oversight. It's a sacred partnership blending goldsmith's skill with cosmic will. You chuckle, thinking of a goldsmith nodding to a priest like you'd appease a picky client. Ever tweak a project for the boss? That's their vibe, but with Amun's gaze. You glance at the amulet, its cross prayer shimmering a coded blessing for a king's eyes. The goldsmith's verses born in guild workshops gain their soul through these rites, tying them to Meroa's starry pulse. You recall that guild feud, their stolen spiral, threatening their mana. Priests keep such tensions in check, ensuring poems serve Nubia, not clan pride. But mistakes happen. A misetched verse or skipped offering could unravel the huaca, and priests are stern when poems stray. You're caught feeling the priests sway, their hands staring the jewelry's secrets under Meroa's starry glow. The goldsmith's craft is theirs, but priests' blessings make it holy. And you're about to face the fallout when these sacred verses are betrayed. As you slip from the courtyard, Meroa's rhythm temple drums Nile breezes feels like a sacred pulse. You're starting to grasp the priest's world, their influence turning poetic inscriptions into hymns for Amun, binding goldsmiths to gods and secrets. Those coded verses are Nubia's prayer, but leaks cut deep, and you're itching to see what happens when a goldsmith's stylus strays. You're lurking in the misty dawn of Meroa's temple district, the desert air sharp with the chill of the Nile and the faint scent of smoldering cat from sacred altars. The city stirs with the soft tread of priests and the low bleat of rams, but you're still chasing those ritual poems inscribed on Nubian jewelry, their cross prayers glowing with priestly huaca. Remember that priest in the temple courtyard blessing a war amulet with a cat chant. His sacred oversight kept the verses divine, but betraying them was a sin against Amun and the king. Now, you're facing the consequences for revealing these poetic inscriptions, and trust me, it's heavier than a gold necklace in a sandstorm. Picture yourself huddled in a temple plaza, the morning sun glinting off sandstone as a goldsmith stands before a priest, his head-bowed wrists bound with leather cords. He's accused of leaking a spiral prayer, a royal lineage blessing to a rival guild, risking its sacred power and exposing Nubia's divine order. In Nubian society, these poems were the kingdom's heartbeat, encoding blessings, curses, or ritual dates, their secrecy guarded by guilds and blessed by priests. A breach could weaken a king's charm, disrupt a harvest rite, or embolden enemies. Historically, by the 8th century BCE, Nubian rulers and priests punished disloyalty harshly, with exile labor or ritual shaming for crimes threatening the kingdom's cosmic harmony. You're watching the goldsmith tremble the priest's glare, colder than a desert night. Here's the quirky bit. Some believed a leaked poem could anger celestial spirits, bringing locusts to punish the traitor. Imagine bugs snitching on your slip sounds like a divine sting, right? Historians still argue whether this was spiritual fear or social control. Did goldsmiths dread spirits, or were priests hyping the stakes? You edge closer, the plaza's tension thick as fog. The priest's voice booms, detailing the crime the goldsmith bribed with silver shared the spiral's rhythm, nearly letting rivals mimic a queen's blessing. Punishment varies. Minor slips might mean re-etching under scrutiny, but this betrayal demands exile. He's banished to a distant quarry, his guild mark scarred from his tools, his name erased from the clan's lore. You wince, feeling the shame. It's like being canceled online, but with your whole kin ghosting you forever. You smirk, picturing the goldsmith sweating his secret like you dodge a group chat expose. Except here, it's Amun's wrath looming. You notice the guild's reaction. Goldsmiths turn away their loyalty to the poem stronger than pity. A leak doesn't just doom the traitor. It risks the guild's mana, threatening royal commissions or temple rights. The priest's verdict restores balance, ensuring inscriptions remain sacred scripts. You're struck by the ripple effect, how one slip can shake Meroa's foundations, blessings falter, rivals emboldened, harvests cursed. You recall that apprentice polishing his stylus, his hands raw under pressure. This is why betrayal isn't just personal. It's cosmic, endangering Nubia's bond with the stars. You chuckle, thinking of a goldsmith, double-checking his verse like you'd triple-check a risky email. You glance at the plaza's altar, its golden ornaments etched with faint prayers, their secrets intact, but fragile. The goldsmith's fate is a warning reveal, a poem, and you unravel Meroa's divine web. Priests' cat rituals and guild oaths guard these verses, but the king's spies lurk ready to pounce. You're hooked, feeling the goldsmith's dread, their world balanced on a stylus's edge. You recall that guild feud over a copied cross prayer, the tension thick with a Petamax shadow. But secrets travel, some inscriptions spread beyond Meroa. Through trade their meaning shifting in new hands, and you're about to track how these poetic jewels roamed Nubia's desert roads. As you slip from the plaza, Meroa's rhythm, temple bells, Nile lapping, feels heavy with judgment. You're starting to grasp the goldsmith's burden, their poetic inscriptions, not just art, but sacred pacts, binding them to gods and kings. Those hidden verses are Amun's voice, but leaks cut deep, and you're itching to follow their trail beyond the temple's golden glow. You're weaving through the bustling dawn of a Meroa marketplace, the desert air alive with the scent of roasted sorghum and the sharp tang of myrrh traded from distant caravans. The city pulses with the clatter of camel hooves and the soft murmur of merchants haggling, but you're still chasing those ritual poems inscribed on Nubian jewelry, their cross prayers guarding sacred secrets. Remember that exiled goldsmith banished for leaking a royal lineage verse. His betrayal showed the poem's divine weight, but their whispers weren't confined to Meroa's temples, they roamed far. Now, you're tracking how these inscribed jewels spread beyond Nubia through trade, their secrets shifting in new hands, and trust me, it's wilder than a caravan crossing the Sahara. Picture yourself at a dusty trade post on Meroa's outskirts, where merchants from Egypt, Axum, and the Red Sea barter gold, ivory, and ostrich feathers under palm frond awnings. A goldsmith, his guild mark hidden under a linen cloak, trades a golden ring etched with a faint prayer for an Egyptian bronze awl, showing an Aksumite artisan how to carve a spiral verse. These poetic inscriptions, blessings for kings, curses for foes, traveled Nubia's trade routes, carried by goldsmiths, traders, or temple envoys. Historically, by the 8th century BCE, Nubia's gold trade reached Egypt and the Horn of Africa, with inscribed jewelry prized as talismans, their verses blending spiritual power with exotic allure. You're watching the goldsmith guard his poem's meaning, sharing only its form, not its sacred intent to bless a harvest. Here's the quirky bit. Some traders claimed inscribed jewels hummed during desert nights, guiding caravans with divine luck. Imagine a ring buzzing like a GPS. Sounds like a merchant's tall tale, right? Historians still argue whether this was folklore or trade ploy. Did jewels really hum? Or were traders hyping their value? You step closer, the market's dust swirling around you. The goldsmith's spiral verse, a faint prayer for fertility, is veiled in Amun's imagery, meant for a priest's eyes in Axum. Guilds controlled this spread, knowing a leaked poem could let foreigners mimic blessings or weaken Nubia's divine edge. You're struck by the balance trade, shared the jewel's fame, but secrecy kept their huaca in Meroe. It's like posting a viral design, but hiding the blueprint glory without spilling the source. You smirk, imagining the Axumite puzzling over the verse like it's a cryptic app glitch. You'd rage quit. You notice an Egyptian trader, his eyes gleaming as he fingers the ring, hoping to sell its style in Thebes, but he misses its harvest code. He's out of luck. The guild's poems, like their war blessings, are layered with spiritual metaphors, their meanings locked to outsiders. But trade blurred these lines. Nubian conquests, like Paye's push into Egypt, sent goldsmiths to foreign temples where they carved verses blending local gods like Osiris with Amun's prayers. Others, traded as gifts to Axumite kings, carried poems that morphed into new rites, their codes shifting to fit foreign stars. You wince, recalling the exiled goldsmith's shame. Imagine his fear if his leak reached Egypt, weakening a king's charm. You chuckle, picturing a goldsmith dodging questions like you'd sidestep a nosy friend's probe. You wander past a caravan loading gold dust, its leader wearing a poem-etched amulet, a nod to Meroa's sacred craft. The jewel's reach was vast trade routes, carried them to Red Sea ports, where sailors spread their fame, or to Ethiopian highlands, where priests adapted their verses. You're hooked, seeing the poem's legacy rippled beyond Meroe, their codes a silent script of Nubia's power. You recall that guild workshop's torchlit glow, its styluses guarding Amun's secrets, but these verses left a deeper mark, inspiring Nubian art beyond jewelry. And you're about to trace how their poetic inscriptions shape the kingdom's cultural canvas under Meroa's starry skies. As you melt back into Meroa's rhythm market shouts, Nile lapping, you feel the poem's journey, their inscribed secrets, not just codes, but threads in Nubia's vast web. Those jewels carried Meroa's voice far, but their legacy in art runs deeper, and you're itching to explore their broader stage. You're wandering the golden haze of Meroa's temple district, the midday sun warming the air with the scent of blooming acacia and the faint tang of molten gold from nearby forges. The city pulses with the clatter of market stalls and the soft hum of priests chanting, but you're still chasing those ritual poems inscribed on Nubian jewelry, their spiral prayers spreading blessings across trade routes. Remember that goldsmith trading a harvest verse with an Aksumite at the market. Those coded inscriptions roamed far, but their deepest imprint lies in Meroa's heart-shaping Nubian art. Now you're tracing how these poetic jewels inspired the kingdom's cultural canvas. And trust me, it's more radiant than a temple's gold under a moon's gaze. Picture yourself stepping into a royal shrine, its sandstone walls carved with lions and stars, a stone relief shimmering with a spiral motif echoing a jewelry prayer. These aren't just decorations, they're echoes, the goldsmith's ritual poems woven into Nubian sculpture, pottery, and textiles. The verses, motifs, crosses, swirls, step patterns became symbols of divine favor, their coded meanings hidden in plain sight. Historically, by the 8th century BCE, Meroa was a cultural hub, its jewelry inscriptions influencing artisans who carved temple reliefs or painted ceramics with nods to blessings or curses. You're running your fingers along a relief's cross, its form mirroring a war prayer stroke, feeling the goldsmith's touch in every groove. Here's the quirky bit. Some artisans claimed their carvings hummed during solstice rites, guided by poem spirits to mirror sacred verses. Imagine a stone vibing like a cosmic playlist. Sounds like a sculptor's trance, right? Historians still argue whether this was spiritual inspiration or artistic hype. Did spirits guide carvings, or were artisans riffing on the poem's mystique? You step closer, the shrine's air thick with myrrh and reverence. A ceramic jar nearby shows a spiral its curve matching a fertility verse, while a woven shawl bears stepped motifs echoing a harvest blessing. You're struck by the connection, how the goldsmith's poems born in guild workshops seeded Nubian art, turning prayers into cultural treasures. It's like a viral meme spawning fan art, but here it's a kingdom soul in stone and clay. You smirk imagining your favorite lyric in a mural cool, but it's not guiding a Nile flood. The poem's metaphors layered with Amun's might or Apetamak's roar, inspired reliefs, vases, even royal seals, each a subtle nod to Meroa's secrets. You wander to a temple courtyard where a stele bears a cross poem, its rhythm echoing a jewelry's war curse. The goldsmiths, steeped in guild secrecy, infused their verses with huaca, their codes sparking art that resonated with kings and priests alike. But it's bittersweet their names are lost, their guilds credited only in whispers. You recall that exiled goldsmith, his leaked spiral staining his legacy. His verses live in these carvings, but he's a ghost in the stone. You chuckle, picturing him nodding at a vase's swirl, anonymous but proud. Ever create something epic and get no credit. That's the goldsmith's vibe, their art eternal, but their voices silent. You pause by a sculpted lion, its mane etched with a spiral like a solstice prayer. The poem's influence ripples through Meroa's temples, tombs, even textiles dyed with cross patterns. You're hooked, seeing the verses as seeds, their cosmic and sacred meanings sprouting across Nubian culture. The goldsmiths' styluses wove a golden tapestry, their tools and chants rooting it in Meroa's heart. You recall that starry observatory, its Pleiades guiding a flood verse. But the goldsmiths themselves, they lived dual lives, balancing sacred craft with community duties. And you're about to explore how they juggled their divine styluses under Meroa's starry skies. As you drift back to the artisan quarter, Meroa's pulse priest's hymn's market hum feels like a carved song. You're starting to grasp the poem's reach, their inscribed secrets, not just codes, but sparks for art that binds Nubia. Those verses wove a kingdom's identity, but the goldsmiths' lives were the stylus, and you're itching to uncover their dual roles in this sacred golden world. You're slipping through the twilight hum of Meroa's artisan quarter, the desert air soft with the scent of cooling clay and the faint clink of hammers from open workshops. The city glows with torchlight, its pulse of temple chants and camel grunts fading into the starry night, but you're still chasing those ritual poems inscribed on Nubian jewelry, their spiral prayers carving Nubia's art with divine codes. Remember that lion relief in the temple, its mane echoing a solstice verse. Those inscriptions shaped a cultural tapestry, but the goldsmiths were more than artisans. Now you're exploring their dual lives, balancing sacred craft with community roles. And trust me, it's busier than a Nile market at flood season. Picture yourself trailing a goldsmith through Meroa's bustling alleys, his cloak dusted with gold flecks as he weaves past traders and priests. By day, he's a guild master, etching Amun's blessings onto royal amulets in a torch-lit workshop, his chants syncing with a Petamak's roar. By night, he is a father, a counselor, or a temple aide, settling clan disputes or tending communal grain stores. In Nubian society, goldsmiths were social pillars, their high status from crafting sacred jewelry, tying them to civic duties like organizing labor or teaching apprentices. Historically, by the 8th century BCE, Meroa's artisans held roles beyond their forges, their skills serving gods, kings, and kin alike. You're watching him pause to mediate a quarrel over water rights, his voice calm but firm like he's aligning gold sheets. Here's the quirky bit. Some goldsmiths used poetic metaphors in disputes, likening tempers to mis-etched verses needing a stylus's touch. Imagine settling a fight with Soothe. This, like a prayer stroke, sounds like a smith's wisdom, right? Historians still argue whether this was leadership or cultural flair. Did goldsmiths mediate with craft metaphors? Or was it just Nubian banter? You follow him to a granary where he inspects millet sacks, his goldsmith's eye spotting flaws like he'd catch a crooked spiral. His dual life, his relentless workshops demand precision etching, harvest prayers under priest scrutiny, but the clan pulls him into sewing festivals or temple upkeep. You're struck by the grind, how he balances divine codes with earthly needs. It's like juggling a job and family, except your job talks to a moon and your family runs a kingdom. You smirk, thinking of your own multitasking chaos ever burn out on a deadline? That's his life with styluses instead of keyboards. You notice him slip into a workshop, his hands lifting a bone stylus to teach an apprentice a cross prayers angle. Even here, he's a mentor passing guild secrets while chanting to Pachamama. But his mind's half on a council meeting about trade routes. The pressure's fierce. A flawed verse could mistime a floodlight angering the king, while neglecting the clan dims his mana, weakening his guild's huaca. You wince feeling the weight. It's like bombing a pitch while your team needs you. Except here, it's cosmic harmony at stake. You chuckle, picturing him practicing his stylus strokes like you'd rehearse a big presentation, hoping to nail both roles. You glance at his worn sandals, a sign of his humble roots despite his skill. He's no noble, but his amulets bind Meroa to the stars guiding kings and priests. The guild fuels his pride, but the clan grounds him, his dual life a bridge between gold and grain gods and kin. You're hooked, seeing how his stylus carves both prayers and community a thread in Nubia's tapestry. You recall that exiled goldsmith, his leaked spiral scarring his clan. Our goldsmith here lives, that fear balancing duty with devotion. You chuckle, imagining him dodging guild drama like you'd sidestep office gossip. His world is a tightrope, but time shifts gold, and you're about to reflect on why these poetic secrets faded like stars at dawn. As you ease into Meroa's starry alleys, the city's rhythm flutes whines, distant hammers feels like a living poem. You're starting to grasp the goldsmith's world, their dual lives stitching sacred craft to Nubia's heart. Those poetic inscriptions were their manna, but kingdoms fall, and you're itching to explore why their verses vanished under Meroa's starry skies. You're drifting through the quiet twilight of Meroa's artisan quarter, the desert air soft with the scent of cooling sand and the faint hum of a distant flute weaving through the starry haze. The city's pulse slows, temple bells fade, market murmurs dim, but you're still chasing those ritual poems inscribed on Nubian jewelry, their spiral prayers threading Amun's blessings into Meroa's art. Remember that goldsmith juggling guild and clan, his stylus steady, despite a life split between sacred verses and community. His dual role held Nubia's heart, but even the brightest gold tarnishes. Now you're reflecting on why these poetic inscriptions vanished, their secrets fading like starlight at dawn, and trust me, it's as poignant as a Nile breeze whispering farewell. Picture yourself leaning against a temple wall, its sandstone worn smooth by time, the once gleaming amulets etched with prayers for kings or floods, now silent, their verses lost to the ages. The workshops are empty styluses, still the guild's chants gone. Historically, by the 4th century CE, Nubia's kingdoms, like Meroa, declined under pressures from Aksumite raids, Christianization, and environmental shifts like desertification. Temples crumbled, priests scattered, and goldsmiths' oral traditions, unrecorded in a culture prizing performance, faded as artisans died or fled. The poems guarded by guilds couldn't survive without their voices. You're touching a cracked amulet, its spiral prayer faint feeling the weight of a lost script. Here's the quirky bit. Some elders claimed a Epidemic hid the poems, dimming their meanings to shield them from Christian priests' eyes. Imagine a lion god cloaking his own verses. Sounds like a divine vault, right? Historians still argue Whether this was spiritual coping or deliberate secrecy, did Epidemic guard the poems, or did time erase them? You step into the starry courtyard, Meroa's silence heavy. The goldsmith's secrecy, their strength was their downfall. Verses taught through chants and rituals relied on living masters. As invasions broke, guilds, droughts thinned clans, and Christian missionaries replaced Amun's rites, the knowledge frayed. Early chroniclers like those in Axum noted Nubian goldwork's beauty, but missed the poems their meanings lost to outsiders. You wince, imagining a goldsmith's grief, his solstice verse half forgotten. It's like losing a family song mid-verse, except it's a kingdom soul. You recall that exiled goldsmith, his leaked spiral staining his clan. His fear of betrayal kept poems pure, but doomed them when Meroa fell. You glance at a temple relief, its cross fading a ghost of a harvest prayer. The poems linger in fragments, tomb carvings, ceramic swirls, woven shawls, but their meanings dimmed, reduced to art by those who couldn't read them. Priests' cat rituals gild oaths, the king's oversight, all faded under new faiths and empires, leaving jewels that speak only to the stars. You smirk, thinking it's like a group chat dying when the vibe shifts, heartbreaking, but time rolls on. You chuckle softly, picturing a goldsmith's ghost sighing at a museum amulet, its blessing clueless to its power. Meroa feels still its peaks, cradling the city's last light. The poem's story of Stylus's gods and kings endures in their gold a silent hymn to Nubia's glory. You're starting to feel their loss, a language etched for eternity, yet lost to time, but also their strength, how they wove Meroa's secrets under starry skies. Those goldsmiths, with their dual lives and sacred tools, crafted more than jewelry. They crafted a world, its echo lingering in every stroke. The desert's glow softens Meroa's stones, blurring into the night, their spirals and crosses fading like whispers under a starry veil. You're standing by a quiet Nile bank, the water reflecting stars, the breeze humming through ancient ruins. The goldsmith's poems, bright with blessings and curses, tied gold to gods, their styluses singing Amun's will. Though their verses dimmed, their spirit hums in the carvings, in every swirl catching moonlight. Let the Nile's murmur cradle you the stars, a gentle guide. Close your eyes, feel Meroa's ancient embrace, and drift into a dream where the golden poems still sing. Good night.